No, it was fun yesterday. We were both on court with Evian. Yeah, I'm really happy, obviously, to be playing with him. And we had a good time yesterday.
Carlos Alcaraz didn't miss Wimbledon because his body failed him. He missed it because his focus vanished. For months, the public was fed a strict, calculated medical narrative. A damaged right wrist from Barcelona, a slow, cautious rehabilitation process, total radio silence from his camp. But the puzzle pieces never fully matched up. And now, Juan Carlos Ferrero has finally broken his silence, letting the real truth slip out. The wrist was only half the story. The real disruption was happening completely off the court. A high-profile, highly distracting new romance that completely shattered the young champion's discipline right when he needed it most. Think about what was actually on the line here. This is a 7-time Grand Slam champion, a generational force who completed the career Grand Slam in January by conquering the Australian Open. He had the tennis world at his absolute mercy. Then, total collapse. He vanished from the tour after April. He skipped Rome. He skipped Roland Garros. And finally, the ultimate blow. He pulled out of the grass season entirely, abandoning his hunt for another Wimbledon title. The corporate PR machine blamed the physical wear and tear of the ATP Tour. They wanted you to look at medical charts and training videos. They wanted a clean, safe excuse. But anyone who understands high-level athletics knows that the physical body follows the mind. When Ferrero recently addressed the media, he didn't hide behind safe medical statements. He pointed straight at the reality of managing a superstar who suddenly discovered a life outside the white lines of a tennis court. A life filled with late nights, intense emotional investments, and a complete shift in daily priorities. For a long time, the public suspected that Alcaraz's team was hiding something. The recovery timeline kept moving. The updates were deliberately vague. Now we know why. You can't heal a physical injury when your mind is completely detached from the sport. This isn't a simple case of a player falling in love. This is about a high-stakes, internal war for the soul of a tennis prodigy. On one side, you have the grueling, unyielding demands of an elite sport that requires absolute, monk-like devotion. On the other side, you have the intense temptation of a glamorous, fast-paced romance that offers an easy escape from the constant pressure of chasing world rankings. Ferrero saw the shift happening early on. He recognized the exact moment when the tennis court stopped being Carlos's primary sanctuary. The early morning practice sessions started getting delayed. The intensity during baseline drills dropped. The hunger that defined his historic rise was being systematically replaced by the intoxicating high of a new relationship. The media wants to keep selling you the story of a tragic, injured warrior. But the real story is much rawer. It is a story about a young man tearing down his own empire for a normal life. Let's strip away the corporate shields. To understand how this new romance completely derailed Alcaraz's season and cost him a shot at Wimbledon history, we have to look past the official press releases. We have to analyze the exact timeline of his off-court distractions, the secret tension it created within his circle, and the precise moment Juan Carlos Ferrero realized the battle for Carlos's focus was officially lost. To understand the sheer weight of Ferrero's admission, you have to look at the massive structural shifts that hit Alcaraz's camp right before this crisis exploded. This didn't happen in a vacuum. The foundation was already fractured. In late 2025, the tennis world was fundamentally rocked by the official, shocking split between Carlos Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero. It was an abrupt separation that brought a brutal end to one of the most successful player-coach partnerships in history. The separation wasn't polite. It was born out of bitter disputes and massive, long-standing disagreements between Ferrero and Alcaraz's father regarding the long-term management of Carlos's career. Ferrero walked away wounded. He had guided this kid from a 15-year-old junior to the absolute top of the world. He invested his entire reputation into building a legend. To be pushed out right after Carlos secured his legacy was a devastating professional betrayal. Samuel Lopez stepped into the head coaching role, but the ironclad discipline that Ferrero enforced was permanently gone. Without Ferrero's constant, unyielding oversight, the boundary lines around Carlos's personal life immediately began to blur. Then came April. The wrist injury in Barcelona was entirely real. The physical ligaments were genuinely inflamed from a brutal, overloaded schedule. But an injury of that nature typically requires a clear, structured window of rest, followed by an intense, hyper-focused rehabilitation block. That is where the plan completely derailed. Instead of locking himself inside the gym to rebuild his grip strength, Carlos was suddenly spotted in entirely different circles. The Spanish tabloids began tracking him away from his home base in El Palmar. He was appearing at high society events in Madrid. He was being photographed with a prominent new romantic interest, someone completely detached from the insular world of professional sports. For a young man who had spent his entire teenage existence under a strict sporting microscope, this new relationship was a total revelation. It offered validation that had nothing to do with winning trophies or defending ranking points. The internet media machine immediately went into overdrive. They began connecting the dots that the official ATP Tour updates were trying to hide. They looked at his social media activity. His updates dropped to absolute zero after May. For nearly 2 months, a multi-million-dollar global brand went completely dark. Why? Because a real physical rehab program is highly documented. It involves daily training clips, physiotherapy sessions, and progressive milestones. Carlos wasn't posting them because he wasn't doing them at the required elite level. He was traveling. He was living the life of a young multimillionaire in love. When Ferrero was recently asked about Carlos's prolonged absence in an unfiltered interview, he dropped the diplomatic mask. He didn't speak as a current coach bound by a non-disclosure agreement. He spoke as a mentor who saw his life's work being actively compromised. Ferrero explicitly pointed back to warnings he had issued during his final months with the team. He had openly stated that Carlos needed to learn real off-court professionalism. He warned that today's young players get sucked into a false reality where they are treated incredibly well everywhere, causing them to completely lose sight of the daily sacrifice required to stay at the top. Ferrero's admission was damning. He confirmed that the primary obstacle to Carlos's return wasn't the physical state of his tendons. It was his lack of willingness to do the lonely, painful work of rehabilitation, while a glamorous, effortless lifestyle was waiting for him right outside the door. The new romance provided the perfect psychological cushion. When you are injured and lonely, the pressure to return is immense. The desperation to get back on court drives your daily recovery. But when you are injured and deeply infatuated, the sidelines stop feeling like a prison. They feel like a holiday. Wimbledon requires an absolute peak of physical and mental preparation. You cannot step onto the grass of Church Road with half-hearted training and a distracted mind. The ball bounces too low, the rallies are too explosive. Samuel Lopez and the remaining infrastructure around Alcaraz realized they couldn't force a player to compete who was mentally checked out. The decision to withdraw from Queen's and Wimbledon wasn't made because the wrist couldn't hold a racket. It was made because Carlos wasn't willing to sacrifice his new personal life to prepare for it. This entire crisis exposes a massive, hidden reality of modern tennis. The public looks at superstars like robots designed to print wins. We forget that the emotional weight of global fame is completely crushing. Carlos Alcaraz was forced to grow up in front of millions of screaming fans, carrying the entire financial future of Spanish tennis on his back. When the physical barrier of the wrist injury presented itself, it broke the momentum, but more importantly, it broke the spell. It gave Carlos a taste of freedom he had never experienced in his life. Ferrero's recent comments weren't malicious. They were an expression of pure, unadulterated reality from a man who knows what it takes to survive at the absolute summit of sports. You cannot have a normal life and be a dominant world number one. It is a mathematical impossibility. Look at Novak Djokovic. Look at Rafael Nadal. Their entire existences were stripped of distractions for decades. Every meal, every relationship, every single waking hour was secondary to the sport. The moment Alcaraz allowed his new romance to take precedence over his physical rehabilitation, his Wimbledon defense was dead in the water. This leaves Team Alcaraz at a massive, historical crossroads. The split with Ferrero left a massive power vacuum, and the current coaching staff has proven they cannot enforce the boundaries required to keep a young superstar grounded. The commercial interests want Carlos on the court. His fans want him winning slams. But Carlos himself is currently navigating the intense human struggle of deciding what kind of life he actually wants to live. The internet will keep debating the medical updates. They will keep tracking the player lists for the upcoming US Open warm-ups in Montreal and Cincinnati. They will analyze his grip posture and physical fitness. But the real test won't happen in a medical clinic. It will happen in his mind. Carlos Alcaraz has the talent to win 10 more Grand Slams. But talent without absolute singular focus is completely useless on the modern ATP Tour. While Jannik Sinner continues to treat the sport like a corporate mission, Alcaraz is discovering the high cost of emotional distraction. The romance might be providing him with temporary happiness, but it has already cost him a legacy-defining summer at the All England club. Don't let the corporate PR machine dictate how you view this sport. The physical injuries are often just symptoms of a much deeper, internal exhaustion. Look at the landscape of your own screen right now. Every sports media outlet is terrified to touch the personal realities of these athletes. They want to keep selling you a sanitized, algorithmic version of sports. I want you to drop a comment below with your honest take. Can a modern tennis superstar maintain a high-profile, intense romance and still dominate the sport? Or is absolute, lonely isolation the only real path to tennis immortality? Let's get into the real data in the comments section below.